My family chose my golden child sister over me. Years later, I built a tech empire, and they begged me to save the company she destroyed. I was 13 when I realized my family had already decided who mattered. My name is Logan. I'm 31 now, and if you had asked me back then what kind of family I came from, I probably would have said normal. But looking back, the signs were always there. They were subtle at first. My achievements were treated as nice little things, while my younger sister Haley got full dinner celebrations for every minor trophy. My parents always seemed ready to drop everything for her dance recitals, while I sat alone at my soccer games wondering if they had been stuck in traffic again. They had not been stuck in traffic. They simply had not come. Haley is 2 years younger than me, and to be fair, she was gifted. She was the kind of kid who sparkled on stage, the kind of girl who could walk into a room and pull every pair of eyes toward her without even trying. She had charm, grace, and the disturbing ability to cry on cue whenever she needed to get out of trouble or make something my fault. My parents, Lisa and Craig, were completely taken with her. Not just in a proud parent way, it was more like they saw her as some kind of golden investment. At first, I did not mind. I was not the kind of kid who competed for attention. I liked tinkering with electronics, building things in the garage, and figuring out how machines worked. While Haley was perfecting pirouettes and getting standing ovations at school plays, I was wiring old computers back to life and making small amounts of cash fixing phones for neighbors. I was proud of those little projects, but my parents never really looked up from Haley long enough to notice. And when they did notice, it was usually only to say something like, "That's nice, Logan, but don't spend too much time on that stuff. You don't want to burn out before you even get to college." College. That became the line in the sand. Haley was groomed for it. Elite summer camps, tutoring private college prep courses starting freshman year. For me, I was told to be realistic and think about trade school. There is nothing wrong with trade school, of course, but it was not my dream. I wanted to study engineering, maybe even start a tech company one day. But whenever I mentioned that, I got the same response. A tight-lipped smile followed by a lecture about how not everyone was cut out for big dreams. It stung. But I pushed through. I told myself that if I just proved myself, they would come around. So I kept working. I fixed things. I learned to code. I taught myself software design from old manuals and YouTube videos. I built my first app when I was 16. It was clunky, ugly, and barely worked. But it was mine. I still remember showing it to my parents, expecting something. Interest, curiosity, maybe even pride. Instead, my mom glanced at her phone halfway through and said, "You know, Haley's team might qualify for nationals this year. Isn't that exciting?" That was the first time I did not answer. I just nodded and left the room. The older we got, the worse it became. By the time Haley was applying to Ivy League schools with a team of private consultants and a vision board my mother practically micromanaged, I was taking night classes at a community college and running a growing repair business from the basement. I was making more money than I expected, enough to buy my own beat-up car and start saving. But my parents still treated it like a hobby. To them, I was just spinning my wheels until I figured out something real to do. The moment that really hit me came when Haley got into Columbia. It was a huge moment, and I congratulated her sincerely. I mean that. I was not jealous of her acceptance. I knew she had worked for parts of it, and I knew it mattered to her. The whole family threw a massive dinner party. Friends, extended relatives, catered food, champagne for the adults. And somewhere between the speeches and the toasts, my dad stood up, clinked his glass, and said, "We always knew Haley would do something special. She's the kind of person who can lead a company someday, maybe even take over the family business." I froze. The family business. My dad owned a small but successful logistics company, something he had built in his 20s. He used to tell me stories about working nights chasing contracts, sleeping in his truck, and building something from nothing. When I was younger, we talked about it all the time. I had always assumed he wanted to pass that on to me one day. Not because I was entitled to it, but because I loved how things worked. I loved the routes, the systems, the pressure points, the way one missed detail could throw off an entire operation. I thought he saw that in me. I thought I would earn it. That night, I looked at him, searching for any signal that he had not just erased me from the future of our family. but he did not even look in my direction. He just raised his glass toward Haley, who was beaming like a Broadway star. I did not say anything that night. I did not make a scene, but something inside me cracked. Not in a dramatic, explosive way. It was more like a quiet shift, like finally accepting a truth you have been trying not to see for years. They had already decided. I was just background noise in Haley's spotlight. Over the next couple of years, that truth kept unfolding. My parents poured money into Haley's tuition, her off-campus apartment, and even helped her launch a little fashion startup on the side. I asked once for a small loan to upgrade some servers for a client project, and they told me they were tight on cash right now. I never asked again. I took on extra work instead. I started skipping sleep and grinding harder. I got smarter about business. I built relationships with developers. I took online certifications in design and AI systems. Slowly, my side hustle became something real. I still went to family dinners. I still played the role. I smiled on cue. I said, "Congrats, Haley," when I was supposed to. I kept my mouth shut, and I stopped expecting anything from them. They did not notice the change. Not really. As long as I stayed polite, stayed quiet, and stayed invisible, everything was fine. Then came the pivot, the twist that set everything else in motion. 3 years ago, my dad called a family meeting. I remember it clearly because it was the first time in forever that he said he wanted to talk to me about the business. My heart actually jumped a little. For one stupid second, I thought maybe he saw me at last. But no, he said he was retiring early and wanted to transition the company into a new era. That was how he phrased it. He said he had been thinking hard about who should take over, and after careful consideration, he had decided it was time to bring Haley in as CEO. She had been learning leadership at school, he said. She understood branding. She had natural charisma. According to him, those things were more important now than logistics or operations. I asked calmly what would happen to the management team, the systems, and the staff who had been with the company for decades. He said, "They'll adapt. It's time for a fresh blood." "And me?" I asked. He smiled like he pitied me. "Logan, you're doing well in your own way, but this just isn't your lane." That line stayed with me like a splinter under the skin. This just isn't your lane. Haley took over, and predictably, everything started falling apart. At first, it was slow. A few clients were lost. Some staff left. She brought in college friends to modernize operations. She fired old hands who had built the company from the ground up. She rebranded with a shiny new logo and a bizarre mission statement that sounded like it had been written by an AI trying to be quirky. The numbers started dropping. Vendors got frustrated. But my parents kept defending her. "She's finding her footing," they said. "She just needs time." I stayed quiet and focused on my own projects. By then, my business had evolved into a full-fledged tech consultancy with 5 employees and clients across 3 countries. I did not brag. I did not gloat. I just kept working. But I watched. I watched as Haley ran the company into the ground. I watched as my parents doubled down on their faith in her, even when the cracks were visible from across the room. And then, a few months ago, my mom called me. She sounded tired, shaky. "Logan," she said, "we need to talk. It's about the business." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the charts on my second monitor. One of my newest contracts had just cleared for 7 figures. But I did not mention that. "Okay," I said. "What's going on?" There was a pause. A long one. "It's bad," she said. "Haley made some mistakes. Big ones. The company is in trouble. We're trying to figure out how to keep the lights on. We were wondering if you could come by and maybe take a look." That was the moment everything started to shift. I did not answer at first. I just let the silence stretch. Because part of me wanted to help. Despite everything, they were still my family. But another part of me, an older and sharper part, remembered all the times they chose her. All the times I was told to stay in my lane. All the dinners I spent smiling while they toasted her success like I did not exist. And now they were calling me. Now they were asking. Now they needed me. That was when I realized they had not just underestimated me. They had forgotten I existed. And now, at the worst possible time, they were remembering. But the thing was, I was not the same Logan they had pushed aside, and I had no intention of saving them quietly. I did not go over to their house right away, not because I was trying to be dramatic, but because I needed to feel the reality of it. I needed to feel that they needed me. After years of being the afterthought, the shadow beside Haley's spotlight, it felt strange having them reach out first. My mom sent a follow-up text the next day. "Logan, I know you're busy, but this is serious. Dad is worried. We could really use your insight." I almost laughed at that word, insight, as if I had not been quietly building my own empire while they poured every resource into my sister's vanity projects. Still, I agreed to come by later that week. I did not wear a suit, just jeans and a hoodie. I wanted to remind them that I was still me. The version they had decided did not look like success. My mom opened the door looking 5 years older than I remembered. Her hair was tied in a messy bun, and her eyes were puffy like she had not slept in days. "Logan," she said, pulling me into a hug, "it's really bad." The living room looked the same, but the energy was wrong. My dad was sitting stiffly on the couch staring at a folder like it was full of death certificates. And Haley was not even there. Apparently, she was meeting with a branding coach that afternoon, which, according to my mom, was crucial. "She's still trying to stay optimistic," my mom explained, wringing her hands. "But we've lost 3 major clients in the last 2 months. Payroll bounced last week, and the bank froze our credit line." I kept my face neutral. Inside, I felt a mix of things: pity, vindication, even a sliver of guilt. But mostly, I felt detached, like I was watching a documentary about people I used to know. They laid it all out for me. Haley had taken over 2 years earlier. At first, she had been full of energy and grand ideas. She rebranded the company. She switched to trendy new logistics software that no one in the warehouse could understand. She fired the operations manager, someone who had been with my dad since year 1 because he was not vibing with the new culture. She hired her college roommate to handle vendor contracts, which ended in a legal mess. And she was bleeding money on useless influencers to elevate the company's image. I flipped through the reports. Red, red, red. "And you let this happen?" I asked flatly, looking between them. My dad did not meet my eyes. "We thought she just needed more time," he said. "She's under a lot of pressure. You know how hard it is for women in business." That nearly made me choke. I had worked with brilliant women, driven, competent, creative powerhouses. Haley did not lack opportunity. She lacked accountability. They asked if I could look into the back-end systems and maybe recommend someone to help. But I could tell what they were really asking. They just did not want to say the words yet, not out loud. After 2 hours, I told them I would think about it. I said I would need access to files and admin dashboards if they wanted a real assessment. They agreed instantly. My dad even muttered something like, "We should have brought you in earlier." It was the closest thing to an apology I had ever received from him. When I finally saw Haley the next week, she barely acknowledged me. "Oh, hey Logan," she said, flipping her sunglasses onto her head. "You're here to do IT stuff, right?" I looked at her and waited. She smirked. "Don't worry, I won't get in your way. I know it's more your speed." More my speed. She still saw me as the nerd in the garage fiddling with wires while she conquered the world. But the world she had built was burning, and she had not even noticed the smoke. Over the next few weeks, I dug in. What I found was worse than I expected. Haley had misclassified employees as contractors, creating a mountain of back taxes. She had defaulted on multiple service contracts. There was a $60,000 marketing campaign with zero return because the influencer she hired had been shadow banned for scamming followers. The CRM was a disaster. Orders were falling through the cracks, and somehow, Haley was still drawing a 6-figure salary and expensing luxury handbags as client gifts. I put together a 20-page report. I outlined immediate threats, midterm recovery options, and long-term strategic pivots. I color-coded everything. My team, yes, I had a team, helped mock up automation tools that could streamline their process and cut costs by 40% within 3 months. I sent the report to my dad and said we needed to meet in person. When I showed up that Saturday, Haley was there. I read your little report, she said, before I even sat down. Cute. Very spreadsheety. My mom flinched. Haley, please. No, I mean it, Haley continued, arms folded. It's all so logical, so binary. But business isn't just numbers, Logan. It's about vision and relationships and storytelling. Haley, I said calmly, your storytelling lost the company $300,000 last quarter. She rolled her eyes. You're just bitter. You always have been. This isn't about saving the company. It's about you trying to prove something. I looked at my dad. Then I looked at my mom. I waited for them to intervene. They did not. So I stood up. You're right, I said. This isn't about proving anything because I already did. I built something on my own. I don't need your validation. Then I turned to my parents. But if you want this company to survive, she cannot be in charge, not even on paper. I'll help, but only if I have full control. Operational, financial, legal. Haley gasped like I had slapped her. You're not serious. You want them to just hand it over to you? No, I said. I want them to save it. You ran it into the ground. I'm offering to fix it. For a moment, no one said anything. Then my mom stood. Maybe we should talk about this calmly. No, I said. It's not a discussion. It's a decision. My dad looked torn. His pride in Haley was written all over his face. But so was the exhaustion and the fear. Then Haley said the thing that finally snapped the last thread of goodwill I had left. If you do this, she said, pointing at me like a child, I'll tell everyone you sabotaged me. I'll tell them you planted bad data. I'll go online, Logan. I have followers. You don't get to erase me just because you're jealous. The room went dead silent. My mom actually looked scared. That was when I realized they knew. Maybe not everything, but they knew Haley was unstable. They knew she was careless. And they had let her do it anyway because they were too afraid of breaking her perfect golden girl image, even while the house crumbled around them. I'm done, I said quietly. If you want my help, I want it in writing, full authority. I'll have my lawyer send over a draft. You have 48 hours. Haley laughed, but there was no real sound in it. Just air and desperation. You think you're better than me? She whispered. No, I said, walking toward the door. I know I am. Just before I stepped out, my mom called after me. Logan, please don't walk away from us. I paused, but I did not turn around. Because after everything, they still had not said what needed to be said. And until they did, I was not coming back. I did not cry when I left that house. I did not scream. I did not throw things. I did not call my best friend or drown myself in whiskey like some dramatic movie character. No, I drove home in silence, windows down, letting the cool wind numb my face. When I got back to my apartment, a minimalist space with more servers than furniture, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the wall. It was a strange feeling. Not quite anger, not quite sadness. Just emptiness. I guess I had always held on to a tiny hope that one day things might balance out, that my parents would see me, not just glance at me, not just remember to send a birthday text, but really see me as someone capable, someone worthy. But what Haley said that day and how quickly they let her say it stripped that illusion clean off. They were not going to choose me. They never had. And it was time I stopped waiting around like some backup quarterback hoping to get called off the bench. For the first week after that blowout, I did not do much. My team at the consultancy picked up the slack. I had automated a good chunk of the admin side and our client base was stable. We were okay. I was okay. But inside, I felt like I had been cracked open. Not destroyed, but peeled back to something raw and exposed. On day 8, I pulled out an old composition notebook from high school. The cover was frayed, the corners bent. Inside were sketches and notes for an app I had once dreamed of building. It was simple, maybe even dumb at the time, a tool to help small businesses track their inventory across different platforms. Back then, I did not have the skill to make it real. Now, I did. That was the moment something clicked. If I was going to rise, it had to be on my terms. No more waiting for their approval. No more trying to prove anything to people who only knew how to look past me. I stayed up that night until 4 a.m., mapping out version 2.0. No distractions, no second guessing, just pure, focused work. It felt good, familiar, like coming home to a version of myself I had not visited in years. That same week, I met with a mentor I had known through a tech incubator years earlier. Her name was Camille. She was ex-Google and now invested in underrepresented founders. I told her I wanted to pivot. I wanted to build something scalable, not just fix broken systems for other people, but create something of my own. She listened. She asked questions. She took notes. Then she said something that stayed with me. They underestimated you. That's their loss, but don't make it yours too. So I got to work again. My consultancy team thought I was nuts at first. Shifting our focus meant losing some steady revenue. But I had enough saved to keep us afloat for 6 months, maybe more. And I would rather gamble on myself than keep cleaning up other people's messes forever. We started small, just me, an engineer named Eli, and a UX designer named Marcy. We met every day in my apartment. No whiteboards, no ping pong tables, no startup theater. Just laptops, coffee, and furious brainstorming. The product was simple in theory, an intuitive AI-powered logistics platform for small to mid-sized businesses. One that could learn patterns, suggest solutions, and cut overhead costs in half without requiring a dedicated IT team. I called it Glassline because it was built to make the invisible visible. Every shipment, every delay, every dollar. And something about that name felt personal. The first version launched in 6 months. It was not perfect, but it was clean, fast, and best of all, it worked. We got beta users through LinkedIn connections, and word of mouth spread quickly. By the end of year 1, we had over 300 businesses using it. I did not take a paycheck the entire time. I lived modestly. No vacations, no shopping sprees, no flashy car. Just me building something real while everyone else still thought I was some basement tech guy who did not understand the bigger picture. Occasionally, I got updates through the grapevine. My parents never reached out directly, but I still had cousins who talked. They said the family company was hemorrhaging clients. Haley had apparently doubled down on another influencer campaign that backfired. She had started blaming toxic negativity from old staff for the drop in revenue. Classic Haley. I did not engage. I did not comment. I listened, nodded, and went back to my work. Then something interesting happened. 16 months after our launch, Glassline was featured in a mid-tier business magazine as one of 10 startups reshaping logistics. A few weeks after that, we got our first acquisition offer from a competitor I had admired for years. I turned it down, not because I did not want the money, but because it was not time yet. I was not building this just to cash out. I wanted it to grow. I wanted it to last. I wanted it to be the thing people remembered me for, not the kid fixing phones in the garage, not the guy passed over for a failing CEO. Logan Shaw, founder of Glassline. A month later, I got a text from my mom. "Logan, can we please talk?" I stared at it for a long time. The next morning, I got a call from my dad. I did not pick up. Then, something shifted. I received an email, official this time, sent from the family company's domain. It was a formal request to consult on a last-ditch restructuring plan. They were finally using the word I had waited years to hear. Help. Not because they wanted to be kind, not because they finally saw me, but because they were drowning. The business was on the brink of collapse. Vendors were walking. A lawsuit had been filed by a former warehouse manager claiming wrongful termination. Haley had apparently left town for a spiritual retreat and was not answering emails. And their accountant, who I vaguely remembered as a man named Dennis who smelled like cough drops, had resigned mid-quarter and left no notes. They did not just want me to help, they wanted me to save them. For a brief moment, I almost said yes, not because they deserved it, but because the company did. There were still employees there, people I remembered from holidays and company picnics. People who had once handed me snacks, patted me on the head and said, You're going to be just like your dad someday. But then I read the last line of the email.
We hope you'll consider this. Haley did her best. Please understand, this wasn't her fault. That was the nail in the coffin. Even now, they could not admit the truth. They could not call it what it was. So I did not reply. Instead, I forwarded the email to Camille and asked her to set up a meeting with our legal counsel. If they were serious about a handover, it was not going to be a casual favor. I was done doing things out of guilt or hope. I had built something they never believed I could. And now that it was standing taller than the empire they had handed to Haley, they wanted back in. But I was no longer the kid waiting in the wings. I was the one holding the curtain open, and they were about to find out how much the stage had changed. It was strange how calm I felt while drafting the email. No bitterness, no adrenaline rush, just quiet clarity. Camille sat across from me in the co-working space we had upgraded to after closing our first big round of funding. The room was bright and modern, full of glass walls and warm lighting. It was the kind of space I used to dream about when I was coding from a rickety desk in my bedroom with takeout boxes stacked beside me. Now it was real. Mine. I'm not doing this out of spite, I told her as I hit send. I know, she said, but you're also not doing it out of guilt, and that's important. She was right. For the first time, I was not reacting to my family. I was responding to reality with precision, leverage, and power. The letter I sent was not aggressive. It was professional. I addressed it to both my parents and outlined the potential acquisition of their company by Glassline Technologies Incorporated. It was not a consultation offer. It was not a proposal for shared leadership. It was a buyout offer with terms attached. Complete operational control. Full ownership transfer within 30 days. All decision-making authority shifted to me and my executive board. Haley removed permanently from any leadership or shareholder role. It was not about punishment. It was about protecting the business from further damage and protecting my own name from being associated with their mess unless I had full control. I sent it, closed my laptop, and did not think about it again for the rest of the day. I had other meetings, other projects. Glassline was in talks with a major shipping chain that wanted to pilot our tracking software across regional centers. I could not afford to get emotionally tangled again. But later that night, the response came. Not from my mom, not from my dad, from Haley. The subject line was, "This is war." The email itself was a rant. Paragraph after paragraph of blame denial and twisted logic. She accused me of manipulating our parents. She accused me of preying on a vulnerable moment. She said I was trying to erase her legacy and steal something that was never mine to begin with. My favorite line was this: "You were never meant to lead, Logan. You just waited in the shadows long enough for something to fall into your lap." I stared at that line for a long time, because for a moment I believed it. Not because it was true, but because that message had been fed to me for so long. The same script over and over again. You are not a leader. You are not special. You are not Haley. But then I remembered the nights I stayed up coding while Haley partied. I remembered the years I spent building something real while she crafted Instagram captions for fake brands. I remembered every invoice I chased, every bug I fixed, every investor who told me no until one finally said yes. Nothing fell into my lap. I built this brick by brick. So I did not reply to her email. I forwarded it to my lawyer and asked him to file it under hostile communications. If she wanted war, I would meet her with silence and strategy. The next few days were a blur of planning. My legal team began drafting a formal letter of intent. Camille and I met with our CFO and finance advisors to determine the ceiling for a strategic buyout. I did not want the company because I missed my family. I wanted it because it still had value if it was salvaged properly. The logistics infrastructure was still solid. The branding was a mess. The client relationships were burned, but the bones of the business were there. It could be rebuilt with the right leadership. I started reaching out quietly to old staff members, the ones Haley had pushed out because they did not align with her aesthetic. They were wary at first, hesitant to talk, but once I explained what I was doing, the responses changed. One by one, they offered to come back, with conditions of course. But the trust was there. They remembered me.
Not as the kid who used to hang around the office on half days, but as the guy who never talked down to them, the guy who asked questions, the guy who actually cared about how things worked. I also had my CTO Eli review the failing back-end systems at the family company. He put together a demo showing exactly how our Glassline platform could replace the outdated infrastructure and save hundreds of thousands within a year. It was not just about taking over, it was about evolution. Meanwhile, Camille pulled strings with a few silent investors who were interested in expanding our reach. They did not care about the family drama. They cared about return on investment. And if I could secure the acquisition, it would open doors into an entirely different market segment. Things were falling into place. Then came the curveball. My parents requested a meeting, not over email, not through lawyers, in person at my office, not their crumbling one. At first, I hesitated. Every instinct told me it was a trap, some emotional appeal, some guilt trip designed to make me flinch. But Camille convinced me to take it. You don't have to agree to anything she said, but power isn't just about winning. It's about showing up on your terms. So I said yes. They arrived late. My mom looked more tired than before. Her blouse was wrinkled and there was a visible stain on her sleeve. My dad looked smaller, not physically, but emotionally, like the years had finally caught up with him. They sat across from me in the glass conference room sunlight, casting clean lines across the table. "You've come a long way," my dad said, his eyes scanning the space. "I have," I said simply. "Why are we here?" My mom spoke first.
We read the offer and we're not ready to sign over everything. I waited. I said nothing. But she continued. "We're willing to give you partial control, a transition period, 6 months of shared leadership. We think that's fair." I nodded slowly. Then I stood up. "Meeting's over." What my dad said startled. "You don't have 6 months," I said. "You barely have 6 weeks. Your accounts are redlined. Your staff is leaving. Haley is one influencer away from dragging your brand through another PR disaster. And you think this is leverage?" My mom's voice cracked. "Logan, please. It's still our company." "No," I said. "It was. Now it is a sinking ship, and I am offering you a lifeboat. If you do not want it, that is fine. But do not pretend you are still at the helm." Silence stretched across the room. Then my dad whispered something I was not expecting. She said she'd sue us. I blinked. "What, Haley?" he said, not meeting my eyes. "She said if we signed the company over to you, she would sue for emotional damages. She would claim we cut her out unfairly, that we destroyed her future." I laughed. I actually laughed. "That's rich," I muttered. "She destroyed herself. I just offered to clean up." They did not respond. I softened slightly. "I am not here to hurt her," I said. "I am here to save what is left. But I will not do it half-blind. I will not do it with one hand tied behind my back." They looked at each other. My mom wiped her eyes. Then my dad said quietly, "We'll talk to the lawyers." That night, I stayed late at the office. I was not celebrating, not yet. There was too much still at stake. But something inside me had shifted. For the first time in my life, I was not fighting for a seat at the table. I was building the table. I was choosing who sat at it, what the menu was, and what the rules were. I had the leverage now, and I was going to use it, not to destroy, but to rebuild, in my image. My parents signed the papers exactly 12 days after that meeting. It happened on a Wednesday morning in a lawyer's office overlooking the city skyline. The conference room was quiet, except for the shuffling of papers and the occasional click of a pen. My mom did not look at me. My dad's hand trembled slightly when he signed the last page. Haley was not there. She had refused to attend, sending a furious email the night before that ended with, "You'll regret this. You'll all regret this." But I did not regret anything. The moment the deal was done, Glassline Technologies officially acquired the family business, renamed it, restructured it, and began the full-scale transformation. We called it ShawLink. Not for ego, for clarity. The old company was tainted, bloated, and broken. ShawLink was clean, precise, scalable,
And for the first time in its 37-year existence, it was mine. The first thing I did was walk through the old building. It was eerie. Dusty corners, empty desks, broken vending machines. Half the warehouse lights would not even turn on. My dad had once told me that company was his proudest achievement. Under Haley's leadership, it had become a husk. So we gutted it. Not completely, just enough to let it breathe again. We brought in my team from Glassline. They updated the logistics systems, automated half the manual processes, and implemented real-time shipment tracking with predictive delay alerts. It took weeks of late nights, weekends included, but the energy was electric. Everyone could feel it. Something big was happening. I personally rehired 5 people Haley had fired. The operations manager, Tim, nearly cried when I walked into the diner where he was working and asked if he wanted to come back. He did not even ask about salary. He just shook my hand and said, "I've been waiting for this day for years." The staff meetings felt different now. No more jargon. No more buzzword-heavy slideshows. No more empty talk about vibes and storytelling. We talked numbers, results, strategy. And people listened. Not because I demanded it, but because I had earned it. Then came the real payoff. 3 months after the acquisition, we landed a contract with a nationwide medical supplier. They needed efficient, discrete distribution across 12 states with zero tolerance for delays. The old company would have buckled under the weight of that request. ShawLink executed flawlessly, and just like that, revenue doubled. Meanwhile, Haley imploded. After the sale, she tried to rally support online. She made a long, heavily filtered video titled "The Truth About My Brother's Takeover" and painted herself as the visionary who had been cut down by corporate greed and patriarchal control. Her followers, mostly lifestyle fans and wannabe entrepreneurs, sympathized for about a week. Then screenshots surfaced. Emails, invoices, internal memos. Leaks from staff who had finally had enough. It turned out that trying to be a CEO while running a fashion blog did not sit well with actual business people. By the end of the month, her credibility was shredded. She lost sponsorships, her branding coach dropped her, even her favorite wellness retreat in Sedona canceled her speaking engagement. She sent me one final message. "Congratulations. Hope it was worth destroying your sister's career for a stupid warehouse." I did not reply, because it was not about her career. It was about everyone else she had stepped on while trying to build it. My parents stayed quiet after the sale. For the most part, I heard things through mutuals. My mom was too embarrassed to go to her book club. My dad stopped talking about the business altogether. They had not just lost the company, they had lost the illusion. For years, they thought they were shaping a dynasty through Haley, but all they had done was prop up a house of cards. 6 months after the acquisition, my dad called. I let it go to voicemail. His voice was low and worn down. "Logan, I just wanted to say I saw the article in Forbes. You're doing something incredible. I'm sorry I didn't believe in you sooner." That should have hit me hard. It did not. Because by then, I did not need it anymore. I had already won. Not just the company, not just the success. I had won back myself. The version of me I used to bury for their comfort. The kid who fixed old phones and drew app sketches in composition notebooks. The teenager who swallowed his pride every time they said, "Be realistic." The man they tried to pretend was just doing okay in his own little way. He was not little anymore. He was the reason hundreds of people had jobs, families had income, and vendors were getting paid on time. And they knew it now. Everyone did. We held a relaunch event at the new headquarters, a modern facility on the outskirts of the city. It was sleek, energy efficient, and equipped with technology that made the old warehouse look prehistoric. Clients flew in from all over the country. We unveiled new partnerships, presented future expansion plans, and celebrated the next chapter of ShawLink. At the end of the night, I stood on the main stage. No script, no slides, just a microphone and a packed room. "I want to thank everyone who believed in the work before the world did," I said. To the ones who stayed loyal, who got back up after every setback, who made something out of nothing. We did this together. The applause was thunderous. I stepped off the stage and walked out into the cool evening air. There were stars overhead, quiet, clear. And for the first time in years, I was not carrying anything. No bitterness, no need for revenge, just peace. And that, I think, was the real win. Because in the end, they did not just underestimate me, they handed me the keys to prove them wrong. And I did it, silently, relentlessly, without permission, but on my terms. That was the last time anyone ever called me the shadow.